am I qualified to talk about pitching? So I don't have a presentation, but I do have some talking points that I'll start with just to get the conversation going. But I'm hoping that most of this is Q&A, so we can talk about whatever stuff you guys want to talk about. I guess with pitching, but also with anything. Doesn't have to be pitching either. If that's not the hardest problem burning on your mind right now, maybe there's something else. So I've started 4 companies. All of them have made millions of dollars in revenue. 2 of them were sold. One I'm running now. Um, 2 were more bootstrapped, so I've done that. Spent about 12 years doing that. WP Engine raised a bunch of money, hence the relevance here. We've raised about $43 million over the last 6 years. Our revenue is much higher than that, which just goes to show that we're also good stewards of that money. We're not like the West Coast company that burns through money and wonders when they'll make any. And at the same time, I was a founding member over at Capital Factory, and so in 2009 when we had our program that's kind of like Y Combinator, a summer program. So seen hundreds of pitches, helped people do pitch practices many times, helped them raise money and so forth. And of course, I'm an angel investor through Capital Factory, so I've invested in maybe 15 or 20 companies. So I've been on all sides of the table of investing and at seed stage as well as some of the growth stage. So hence why I think I was invited here to talk about pitching. That seems like the right set of skills. I sound like Kermit the Frog got punched in the throat because of this allergy, so I apologize. It's hard to talk loudly, and it's kind of strange. So I got water here and coffee, so hopefully I'll manage. So thanks for that. I got some notes here, so I'm not checking my emails. Don't worry about that. So again, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, just having seen hundreds of pitches and forming my own and having to raise money myself, that I see there are common mistakes or common or good things that people do. Hoping that maybe kicks off some of the some insights or some useful things. And if you don't already have questions, maybe that'll kick off some questions as well. Before I get started, anything else? Anything anybody wants to say first? No? Okay. Oh, you bet. Okay, so, oh yeah, go ahead.
You said you started 4 companies.
Yeah.
2 were acquired. One is WP Engine, which
right
now. What's the other one?
So the other one was a consulting company that I did out of school. We did have about $1.5 million in revenue at the peak. Then 9/11 happened, and it was very hard to do anything. So it ended up sort of fizzling out. Yeah. So the thing about investors is that they're arrogant. I've never met a humble investor, and I'm one too. So there you go. And they have very strong opinions about things. They always think they're right about those things, and they're different. So everyone has very strong opinions, and they differ from each other, and this is very difficult because then you think like, well, what's a good pitch look like? Well, the problem is everybody wants to see different things. So as one example, people will say, like Mark Suster, for example, a famous investor, one is very vocal online. You should read his stuff; it's very good. He says, "I hate it when I see pitches that don't say who they are at the top. Like, who am I talking to? Who the heck are you? Why should I be listening to you guys in the first place? So I want to know, who is this?" And kind of get to know the person, and then I'm ready to hear about your stuff. But then you talk to the next person like me, and I say, I don't care who you are. I want to know what's going on here. Is there a business? Is there an insight into a market? Do you have some kind of way to make money? Is there a goal? And then you can tell me about you, because usually there's not that much interesting about you actually. You're in school and you don't really have a resume that means anything, and that's fine. That's actually not a problem. But then why would you lead with it? Because it's not actually very useful. So that's me and Mark being completely different. So which one's right? And of course, that's not the question. Right? There's no right. That's a problem, actually. Right? The problem there was different. So there's a few things you can think about that problem. One is to release yourself from this idea that there's the right pitch deck. That's not the case. So that's actually a liberating thing. Because rather than thinking about what's the perfect pitch deck, you can think, what's the story you can tell really well? This is my narrative that I'm comfortable pitching, and I get really excited every time I do. And I'm really good at pitching this particular narrative, that's probably just fine, rather than trying to fit someone else's ideal of what that arc or those things should be. So that's actually a good thing, that you can focus on that. Another thing it means is you can ask the investor first. So there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, what kinds of things, what are your top 3 things you look for? Someone like Suster would say, I look for team. Oh, that sounds like maybe bio should be near the top. I look for team, I look for this, I look for that. You go, okay, and you kind of have your red sauce pitch, the pitch that can be used of all kinds of different things, and you sort of tune it up for whatever you hear from there. So that's the other things you ask first, and then tune it. That's another conclusion. But also, you shouldn't be too hard on the investors for being arrogant and thinking they're always right and being unique, because you're entrepreneurs, which means you're the same way, right? Like starting a company is pretty arrogant. Like, I know the better way to do it. My way's better. I shouldn't join someone else. I should do it myself and invent something. I mean, that's pretty arrogant, and it better be unique, or else why bother, really? I mean, there's all these financial reasons why it should be unique, but also just why bother? It's your time. That's very precious. Why do something that's just the same as everything else? So actually, as an entrepreneur, you're exactly in the same place. It's actually cut from the same mold. So actually, maybe you can appreciate the fact they have those same qualities. Another thing I would say is people, especially if they haven't done this before, haven't built business before, haven't made a business plan, haven't pitched, haven't really seen maybe for a decade how a business operates, it's tempting to get out over your skis of how much you know. I'll build a 5-year plan and put it in the deck. I'll say how I'm going to get customers even though I haven't figured that out yet. I'll say I have a partnership with someone when really it's not really a partnership yet. It's just we're talking. And it's tempting just because you want to put meat in there, meat in the pitch. Look what I've accomplished, and look what I know, and look, you can be confident in me because look what I figured out. And that's a sensible desire, but it's definitely wrong because investors know better. They know that 5-year plan is full of shit, and they know you made it up. And then when they ask you any questions, it'll be crap. And they know you haven't built one before. It won't make any sense really, and they know that deal isn't real. And so then you look like, at worst, a liar because you're saying things that aren't true, like that I have this deal, or at best you just look ignorant, but that you don't know that you're ignorant. Right? So there's really no good outcome in sort of, I hesitate to say lying, right? That's just the worst case, but stretching that way because it's really transparent to someone who's experienced, and there's no good outcome for you in that. It's way better just to say, look, I could show you a 5-year plan, but we all know I'd be making it up. But here's what I think you can do in the next 6 months if I had another 100 grand. I would spend 30 grand on this and 20 grand on that and so on. Like, that's a plan that makes sense. Even if that plan's wrong, at least that's very plausible and sensible. It would make sense that you would have an idea about what that should be. And in no way does it look like you're making something up out of whole cloth, right? Also, any investor that would be fooled by your 5-year plan that you made up is not an investor you want. That is not a sophisticated investor who will be helpful if they think that's real too, right? So it's sort of, you kind of get what you get. If you think about it, that's really the best way to make relationships in general. If you want to have a good relationship with someone, you don't start by lying. That's okay for a temporary relationship, perhaps, especially in college, but for a permanent relationship, which it is with an investor, successful companies that are valuable take over a decade to build. Even Facebook took a decade to get to $1 billion. WP Engine, we're 6 years in. It's definitely going to take a decade to get to $1 billion. I mean, this is a long, long haul. It's a long-term relationship. Also, it's reputation. You're going to build a reputation in Austin or wherever, and the investor has a reputation as well. Most of investment goes off of reputation. Actually, that's really the asset that they accumulate over time. And so, starting a relationship with things that aren't true is just never the right way to do that. In period, with people, and this is not an exception. Another thing you see a lot is stupid TAM slides. The TAM is total addressable market. How big is the market? And you see these dumb things. So like someone will say, I don't know, I'm making it up. I have new software that helps with shipping. And did you know that $60 billion a year is spent in shipping? Now, this is a non sequitur. That doesn't mean people spend $60 billion on software to help with this particular problem, does it? And even if they did, are you trying to create a brand new market where the existing TAM doesn't even matter? So stupid TAMs are very common. Typically in a pitch practice, you'll hear someone say, like, some slide has to say there's billions of dollars here. That's kind of true in the sense that there does need to be a plausible way for the company to make that kind of money or be that kind of value. That part's true. There has to be some reason why this thing, whether it's a new market you're creating that can be big or it's an existing market that you can take a piece out of or whatever, there does have to be a plausible path. But just putting up some thing that's actually a non sequitur is not how you build that case. Another thing I like to say, especially early investing, like when you're doing growth stage, like we've been doing recently with WP Engine, you do have to paint that picture more appropriately. Like when you're into the $50, $100 million a year in revenue, there does have to be a clear path. Like it's not always obvious how you get from here to, let's say, $500 million That's a different sort of a journey than the 0 to 1 million or 1 to 10. And so you do have to have a clear path, and you can't just say, we'll figure it out when we get there. Like at that scale, that's not how that works. It has to be more planful and predictable. But early on, you do figure it out as you go. That is the case. And so, um, it has to be possible if people have to spend this money in general, but um, if the investor already doesn't understand the size of the market, if they don't already know that, again, that means they're not a sophisticated investor for you. How helpful are they going to? Like if you tell them I'm going to do this blah blah on shipping, they have no idea if that's a good idea or not, or how big the market is, or how people work in shipping. How is that investor going to help you ever? They have no idea about the problem space and the domain. So if they have no idea if there's 600,000 or 600 million or $600 billion in this thing, they have no clue. Sorry. How are they going to be helpful to you then in understanding this market? So to me, like the right investor already kind of knows what the TAM is, right? It's probably kind of obvious. So you need to talk about how the company can become big and valuable. That's true, but the dumb TAM slide is usually a big turnoff. I don't think anyone's ever been convinced by a slide like that anyway. I think the key thing, especially when it's early and so you don't have a lot of proof points yet, maybe there's some tech but no customers or a few customers or whatever, there's just not a lot of stuff happening yet. One of the few things you can have is some insight into the problem space. So what I mean is there's something that you know that's special about the market, the problems people have, the particular solution you have, how you can bring it to market, something in there that's special and unique and in a good way, right? In an insightful way that can lead to something. That's something you can really emphasize because if you don't have that, it's not clear what you're pitching anyway. Just like another thing in a space that exists. That's not an interesting pitch to an investor because that could be a fine business, but probably not a big payoff to an investor. It needs to have a big outcome, which means you have to have something that other people aren't doing to achieve that big outcome. And so that's something that you can focus on in a pitch that's exciting. It's emotionally exciting to hear something that is insightful. And then, because we all know in small businesses exactly how you sell and who the customer is and what the problem is and what the product is and how that evolves, that will all change. It's supposed to. That's okay. So knowing what that key insight is, that all that stuff is sort of revolving around and evolving around, that is really important to get to know what that is. And then it's a lot easier as an investor to go, well, I don't know if the product's quite right, but it never is, and they can fix that part. But like if there's no insight into what is interesting about this market or what is it that you're doing here, it's not clear how the product would evolve around what vision, around what theme would it evolve around. So then it's harder to get behind that risk of the product not being there really. It's not always been true, but it's definitely true now that investors want to see not only a path to revenue but profitability, and that does not mean that on the first fundraising round you should be able to get profitable. That's another common thing people do. Is the typical pitch is we're going to raise this money, we're going to do this and that, and then we'll be profitable, or we can raise money. It's our choice. And that is almost never what happens. What happens is either the company doesn't do that well, in which case they don't raise another round, they fail, or the company is doing well, in which case there's no way you can do that under your own steam with your own amount of money because there's so much more you could do, only to raise more money. And so you never get to that point where you're profitable early. You instead raise more money. So on the one hand, an investor wants to see how the company can become profitable when it is at scale. But a lot of times the pitch is focused around how this next round of funding will make us profitable. That is not something the investor is interested in because that's not a path that successful companies take. Let's see. I already talked about 5-year plans. Another common thing is to say we're raising $300,000. Thank you. If you're interested, come talk to me after the pitch. Raising it for what? What are you specifically going to do? What are you going to do with it? And what are the outcomes that you expect to generate with it? So an example would be something that is specific would be something like, so we figured out that we're spending $1,000 a month on AdWords and it's working. But the inventory for AdWords for our space is like $5,000 a month. So we want to spend $60,000 over the next year on just AdWords because we've already proven that channel. Then we want to spend another $60,000 to $100,000 over that same period finding the next channel of growth. We don't know what it is, which is why we need to experiment, and then when we find one, double down in it. And then we need to hire 2 people engineering to do X, Y, and Z, etc. I want to raise this amount of money to do this, and here's why. That kind of a connecting the dots makes it happen? And again, that's the what. And then the question is, what's the outcome at the end? So I'm doing this so that we can get to 100 customers each paying us X, so that we can have product V2, which has this feature, which opens up this market, so that we get to 3 partners in the industry because that's our distribution channel. So that, right, what would it look like? What does success look like if you are able to spend this money to get there? And the reason the goals are important, besides sort of the obvious reasons the goals are useful, not the how, because again, like the details of all the how, that will always change. But the broad strokes of like, what does the business need in its next step, its next milestone to be successful? First of all, you have to know what those are, because if you don't, then again, you're sort of taking a random walk instead of trying to solve for something. So that's number one. It proves that you understand what is important about the business, what is important to do next. And the second thing it does is it explains what the next round is going to look like. Because another way to look at those goals is, so after this 12, 18 months, whatever the sort of look ahead that you're doing for these goals, if it is being profitable, then fine, but probably it's so that we can have these proof points and then raise another round. So you can back into those goals by saying, what will I need to prove by the time I need the next round of money? Because that's what I need to do now, whatever those things are. I can't raise my A round, B round, whatever the next round is. I can't do that unless we're of this size. We have this, we've filled these employee slots that are important that we don't have filled yet. That we have a strong leader in this one area because this one area is critical. That, again, whatever the kind of set of things are we're going to need to be set up for our next round of fundraising, that's what we need to do with this round of fundraising, or else we'll run out of money and not be at a place where it's easy to figure out what to do next. So those goals come from there too. So the goals are what is right for the business in terms of what are the few, that maybe 3 things the business absolutely has to accomplish in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of outcome, and that those things are sufficient to tell a great story for the next round. And then you can back into, and so if I raise X, I can get to there. And that now you've built the path for the investor to see. And so the best thing for an investor is to think, all this company needs is some money. Like, it's not that there's no risk. There's risk everywhere. Everything's a risk. People, team, the market, the product, everything's a risk. That's what early stage investment is lots of risk. That part's okay. But this company, all they need is $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, because they know what they're going to do to try to de-risk and prove and do, like, so all they need is that. And yeah, sure, like, I need to hire a special person for one slot. They're going to need my help with that. Wonderful, but I know that. It's an understood part of the risk. So all they need is money and maybe some help with things like that. And they're free to just run. So by painting a picture in detail of what that looks like, then you sort of generate that thought of like, geez, I understand the risks and all they need now is some dough. And that's the best, because that's what the investors have the most of is just the money, and then hopefully they're also helpful. I tend to find that, like with angels, you get a 50% hit rate of like half of them are really helpful, half of them disappear, or are somehow disruptive, not helpful. So that's bonus when you get help like that. But really, what you're going to get is the money, and so they know that, and so they should have that picture in their mind too. So having those goals and heading back into those. So I think the final thing about goals, I guess I would say, is there's this good cartoon that says growth isn't a strategy, it's a result or an outcome. So with all these kind of goals, like the company will be this big, et cetera, that's not your strategy, it's not your vision, that's the outcome you want. So the company should, again, have an insight and a vision, a strategy about what it's all about, what this company is about, and then have these particular outcomes you're driving to and how you're trying to do that. And that paints the full picture for the investor. I guess the final thing is there are lots of different kinds of pitches, right? There's the elevator pitch that takes 20 seconds, in which case you're not talking about almost anything I just talked about. That's a whole different goal. The goal of an elevator pitch is to get the next meeting. And that's it, just to pique someone's interest, to go, wow, okay, well, let's talk about that. That's it. Maybe a 2-minute, sort of demo day sort of thing, again, is to get a meeting. You get to a little bit more detail because you have 2 minutes and not 20 seconds. But still, like, you're not going to tell the whole story or the whole how in 2 minutes. You shouldn't. It should be to pique someone's interest and get a meeting. If you're actually pitching to raise money, then you have a lot of time. You probably have an hour or 45 minutes. The presentation shouldn't take 45 minutes. but you can have a clear presentation, lots of backup slides. You can send it early so they have a chance to look. A lot of them won't, but that's actually a good indication for you of how serious they actually are. Um, and then you can pack a lot of meat into that, and the goal is actually to move down the path with them. So that's good. Um, so I think the purpose of the pitch, the context and purpose of the pitch is of course very important. And what is the pitch, and what do you put in there? What are you trying to do? So I think when you're trying to think, how do I form the pitch, you have to start by who am I talking to, what am I trying to get next from them, and sort of build the pitch out of that. Again, it's very useful to have what we always call red sauce pitch, meaning sort of the basic stuff, and you can expand it for longer things, and you can shrink it down for other things, and you can switch things out of the order or go into more detail or less, or even just do that in the moment. You can just be going through the thing and see they're not interested, and just sort of go anyway, and then you have your literally 10 seconds of this slide and move on. But you also have your oh, they start asking questions and digging in, and great, we'll stay on this slide for 20 minutes, no problem. So you have that sort of basis that you can use to throw this together. That's helpful to organize your thoughts and your sort of main narrative points that you want to make. I think the final thing I'll just do is I'm throwing out this stuff for you guys. I know it's just like machine gun things, but again, I hope it's helpful and it gets the conversations started. Is what I call using the 5 W's. So remember in school, who, what, when, where, why, and how. How is somehow the sixth 5W thing, sort of like, yeah. And so using those things, all those things should be answered in your pitch in terms of the why. So here's what I mean. Take who, and then you ask why. So why you? Why are you the right people to do this startup? Maybe it's the best idea in the world, but if it's such a great idea, other people will do it too. So why is this team the right team to do it? This expertise, this passion, this insight into the industry, because you have a partnership with UT with some tech, like why this team with this idea in particular? So that's the who. So it's applying why to the who. What? So what? Of course, why are you doing what you're doing? That's often what the pitch is about anyway. No problem. Where? You're doing this in Austin, maybe, or now I guess maybe not, but like why Austin? Is Austin actually the best place to do this? If someone else did the same startup in Silicon Valley, would they destroy you? Because they will if it's a good idea. It's inevitable if it's a good idea. So is it good to do it here? It's a strange question, but it's a good one. It also gets into like, is it a fully remote workforce, and is that a good idea? So it folds into that. These are important structural things of what the company is. When? Why is now the right time to do it? There are so many examples of companies that came out with a product ahead of its time and failed. Right? It wasn't the right time to do it. Or late. Google was late to social, so they failed. Microsoft was so late they never figured it out. Microsoft was late to mobile, so even though they had a great mobile platform, it didn't matter. Right? So timing matters a lot. In fact, there's a venture capitalist, and I'm forgetting his name now, which is too bad, because they invested in over 100 companies and went and surveyed their 100 companies plus 100 other companies just in general in tech, and a wide variety of outcomes from failures to medium successes, big successes, young, old, all this kind of stuff. And the number one thing they found that was correlated with success was timing. Is this the right time to do it? Oddly, I wouldn't have predicted that, but that's true. So is why now? So like a good answer would be something like, so it has only now become possible for this technology to even exist because such and such was invented, and now big data is possible. It wasn't 5 years ago, and now we have these, and we didn't 5 years ago, and so forth. So only now is there like this confluence of things, whether it's social attitudes, like consumers now will use this for things that even a year ago or 2 years ago they wouldn't, right? And so like glass was obviously too early, but it's going to happen, right? It's just that was too early for that tech, right? But clearly, people are walking around with things that are taking video all the time. I hate it, but it's true, right? And so these things are inevitable. Maybe it's VR that will punch through that. Who knows, right? But it's going to happen. Just it wasn't glass. So Uber's a good example, right? Of like it's not like you couldn't have built an on-demand taxi thing somehow, but it's important that this is here and knows where I am. It's important that there's other things that happen that allowed me to trust a random person to get in their car. And that's a societal thing. That's not even about a cell phone. That's other things about sharing and trusting and stuff like that, and people's willingness to do that and openness to do that. Same thing with Airbnb. You could do Airbnb 10 years earlier than they started, right? Like you don't even need, you just mobile part about that. There's no big data in Airbnb. Just a It's a freaking directory of stuff you can go sleep at someone's house. You could have built that anytime, anytime. But it wasn't true that in 1980 you would be comfortable like going to Bolivia and then staying with some random person. But somehow, for whatever reason, you could argue why, but whatever, now it's different. Now there's a new generation who wants to do it, whereas before that would be the opposite. So that's not even technical. That's sort of generational. There's all kinds of things that it could be now. Now is it these three things have happened, so now is the time for this company. Now it's a race because now it's a good idea and possible. So now it's a race to see who will do it. So that's a good answer to how. So you can go through all those 5 W's and ask how or why. Why now, why you, why here, and so forth. And that's very useful. The pitch should answer all those, maybe not where. I admit that's maybe a weaker one of those, but the pitch should in general answer those questions because they're critical questions that are going to be asked. So it doesn't have to be a slide that says why us, although that's very common. In fact, it's probably better than a bio. I have a 4.2 GPA from UT for whatever. Who cares, right? I mean, some of the best entrepreneurs failed out of college, right? Like, who cares what the GPA is? It's not relevant. So, but why us? And answering that crisply, and there may be something in your background or passion or something that helps answer that question. Great, right? There may be, but that actually gives you the freedom for that not to be a resume battle, which you won't win anyway, and say something else that's interesting and insightful and is true about you. So it's a better way to frame to talk about yourself because you have to, of course, but to talk about it in a way that's more relevant and because it goes around that. Yeah.
What was the why now for WP Engine?
Yes. So what happened is I had a popular blog about startups, and so around the time that I even had the idea, so my previous company, Smart Bear, I had sold it in 2007, and left in 2009. My wife was pregnant, and so I was a stay-at-home dad for a year, which was awesome. And so during that time, it's a very difficult thing to do to be with a new baby. Don't do it for a while, and so usually your brain is just mush and you're incredibly tired and so on. It's the only time you're more tired than in college, is in more sleep deprived as then. And so writing, blogging was a way for me to stay intellectually connected with the world and try to, pierce through the fog sometimes and do that. But then it got very popular because I wasn't doing anything else. So, it became better and popular. So then I would get on Hacker News every Monday when I published, and if you're on the front page of Hacker News, you get about 10 or 15 hits a second, and then the server would crash. And so it's like, well, this is dumb. So I'd call other blogger friends and say, listen, I don't care if it costs $50 a month or $100 a month. It can't be too much, but I don't need to. I can spend more than cheap shared hosting. I just want the blog to stay up. So what do you guys use for that? And the answer was always, I don't know, but if you find it, tell me because I need that. So then it turned into customer development, and it turned out there was all these people that were in this position. Why now though? Because WordPress had gone from this little blogging nothing platform to about 16% of every domain on earth ran on WordPress. And there was this kind of tipping point of like, WordPress won. And like, when is exactly that tipping point? Well, of course, it's not like a second in time when that is, but there's some kind of moment where like sufficient momentum of number of freelance developers making sites and how much press it gets and like famous people who are on it and whatever the growth curve of that is, to where like this is now a real problem that people have successful WordPress sites, not just blogs, and they need a place to do this, and so did I, and I happened to be there then. Now WordPress, by the way, is 26% of every site on Earth is WordPress, which is kind of insane. Talk about a big TAM. You already know the TAM's big, I don't have to tell you, right? Quarter of the web is like infinite. Right? It's really big. So it turned out there was no other companies doing this, but the need was big, and WordPress has had this momentum and growth. That's a moment in time where now it's a race. Today there's 15 companies that say they're managed WordPress hosting. 15. So clearly it was true that was the moment where there was enough WordPress and enough pain and sites that were successful, not just little blogs and so forth, to where this was a need. That was the why now. It's sort of like we just uncovered this. It's happening. For some reason, this isn't a thing with a lot of competition yet. It's going to be. Let's go get it. And we are. We are the largest one by far. In fact, you can add all our competitors up together, and they're not as big as us because we went early and hard into that, so the timing was right. Now, look, of course, a lot of times you don't know until in retrospect, time's right? Let's be real about it. But you could still have an explanation for a plausible theory for why now is right?
So how does your pitch differ, if at all, when you're talking to an investor versus a potential customer?
Oh, very different. So the question is, if you're pitching investor versus a customer, how does that change? Very different, because the customer wants to buy something, wants to know what's in it for them. And who are you? And the investor isn't. The investor's interested in the business, and the customer's interested in using the product. Those are very different things. There are a lot of investors who will invest without ever seeing the product. You can decide whether that's wise, but it just goes to show how much they don't care. Whereas a customer who buys the product without seeing it is odd, right? Not typical. The customer cares that you'll be around because they don't want to buy a product and the company vaporizes. So in that sense, they want to know that the company is stable. But other than that, they're not interested. / it's not their business. How you're going to spend your marketing dollars next quarter, right? So, completely different. So all this stuff, all this why now and all this stuff, the customers don't care about any of that. They care about themselves. This is my life. These are my problems. I want to solve without causing too many additional problems. I want to know that you're going to be here. I mean, it depends on what you're selling and why, right? What they're really thinking or how they're evaluating you. Is there competition they're evaluating against? If so, what does that mean, and so on. Again, investors are much less interested in the competition. And customers usually are specifically evaluating the competition, right? For an investor, no competition is actually a problem because it probably means the market doesn't exist. So either you are truly inventing a market, which is valuable, but you better prove that you are inventing a brand new market and it will be big, and that's a tough thing to prove, but very valuable if you can. So it's a perfectly good pitch. It's just you want to have a great story about that, right? Or it's an existing market, in which case you want a lot of competition to prove just how much activity and value, business value there is in this market, and how you're going to carve out your particular niche in it. So they would find it a problem to not have competition, right? Whereas customer, again, they're evaluating that in a completely different way. So, there may be some very basic things that are shared around what does this company stand for, or why is this valuable to a customer? Investor ultimately wants to know that, and the customer needs to understand that, but it's completely different.
In Link Canvas, one of the center blocks there is unfair advantage. And, for software-based companies, SaaS companies, thinking back to the beginning of WP Engine, how do you express that to an investor when they say, well, what's your unfair advantage?
Yeah.
Pretty much, the reality is most people can do any software company.
That is a reality. So I have a whole hour-long talk about this topic. I believe very few companies have unfair advantages early. Sometimes they do. In that case, wonderful. Maybe you literally do have unique tech. There's a patent on it, and it is insane, and no one can replicate it, and you can go run with that like maybe Magic Leap, right? That really is an unfair special advantage. Fine. But almost no company has one. And it's just what you said. Look, if a couple of UT students can do this with research from whatever, then so can someone else. And that's not putting it down at all. It just goes to show that can't be required. That's a great question, but it can't be required early on because that's just not true, generally. And it's okay. What did I have uniquely at WP Engine? Nothing. I mean, there were things that were better or good or an advantage, but not unique. There's 15 competitors now because it wasn't a unique advantage. So to me, if you have one, wonderful, good for you, and it's worth seeking one because it's very good. But there's no way that's required. So the way I change it is two ways. One is, what is your temporary advantages? Because you should have some reason why you're better or smarter or some insight that someone else doesn't have yet, or something. Right? There's something that's not just somebody writing some code or doing some business that isn't a story and isn't interesting. So what is your advantage for now? So for me, for WP Engine, I could say, I'm a multi-time entrepreneur, so there's a lot of business risk in that I don't have. A lot of our competitors, that's their first company. And so there's a lot of mistakes they're going to go make that we're not going to make. And that's going to allow us to stay ahead of them and we're going to make new kinds of mistakes that are necessary to learn and grow, but not other kind of business mistakes that are not useful actually for growth, but they're just what happens if you haven't done it before. We're not going to make those. And so that actually gives us a temporary advantage that's useful. because I was well known in Austin and then online because of this blog, I could recruit really well. That's a total advantage. Forever and ever and unique? No, but it's a totally good advantage because early on it's hard to hire because the company might not exist and the pay's not good or it's not there at all. And I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why it's hard early. So, to have a leg up on hiring great talent anyway early, that is a great advantage. So just take out the unique and just say advantages, even if they're temporary. That's great. That's terrific to look at. And there should be some of those. I think you might admit if there isn't any of those, then gee whiz, that doesn't sound good, does it? Whether you're investing or not. The other thing I'd say is what is eventually your unique advantage? So you take something like an eBay. On day one, there is no advantage. But if eBay can get critical mass of everyone knows this is where you sell anything, which is kind of a weird thing, and if you want to buy that crazy thing that you can't find anywhere else, that toy you had when you were a kid and mom threw it out a long time ago, and you like paid $200 for that one little toy because that was your toy, where the hell are you going to go for that? And if eBay can, once there's enough critical mass, eBay is that. And then good luck for someone else coming in. In other words, network effect on the marketplace, right? So marketplaces never have a unique advantage early, but they often can have one at scale. So I would say, what's your advantages now and what's your unique advantages later when you have time to build something? And there's a lot of answers that can be there. Brand can be an answer. Now again, it's easy to say we'll build a great brand, but building great brands is hard and rare. But what companies that do, like Apple or even something like Warby Parker, right? Like that brand is incredible. And the founders there were great at building brands. That was actually their special secret sauce, was building brands. And it works, right? You could have another exactly the same thing, but Warby Parker is a brand, right? So I think, again, if you can defend the fact that you could build a great brand, that's an example. That's not even tech, and it's not even go to market. Like it's its own. So you can have brand. You could have tech. We are ahead, but we'll stay ahead because we'll be more innovative. Of course, lock in network effects like marketplaces. Um, Sometimes it deals. Usually, those are both. Those are kind of a two-sided sword. A good deal means you're locked in forever, and no one can hurt you. On the other side, if that falls through, your company's gone. So, like Famigo is a good example of a company from Capital Factory that went through this. They made a great deal with Samsung or AT&T, I forget, and it made the company. But then the deal went away, and the company went away. So it's a two-edged sword. But sometimes like a relationship, a business relationship, could be a unique advantage. So there's lots of answers to that, which is great. Right? So what is your eventual unique moat, or that people can't cross, and what's your advantage now? Is how I would break that apart. So in a lean canvas sense, I would just focus. I guess you'd still want both, actually. And I'm thinking of it because you want to know what am I doing today, but also what is my vision for how I'll become that.
Given that pitch somewhere, is that online anywhere?
Yes, Capital Factory University. So I think they archive this.
I wanted to revisit when you talked a little bit about like road mapping and the lack of need for a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
How does that change when you go from something like a software business where things can change rapidly to where at least a few of us are, where we're developing hardware technology, there's IP around it. Some of us are considering like FTA. At what scale? I mean, when your time horizon is kind of 5 to 7 years, but you still have no idea of what's going to happen in those 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
That's a good question. So I agree. Of course, if your timeline for even V1 is long or your iteration time is long, then your viewpoint has to be longer as well. So I agree. Good news is investors who are okay with that are accustomed to that, and so like hopefully their expectations about the uncertainty there, and yet the need to put that on is matches what you need to do. What you probably know in that time horizon is what it's going to cost you, and the thing you don't know is how to get the results, right? So I think what you can do is you can characterize your costs better and be more confident about that. Part of the reason why in software it's hard, part of it's because the market and the product changes, and so changes mean you don't know. But another part is depending on what those sales look like and when and how and what the customers are, that will reflect somehow into the costs and investments you want to make. That's part of why you don't know, right? But with a time scale where you're like, we're going to work on this for 3 years, and I can tell you right now we will have no revenue until then. I know that. Okay, well then you probably don't have as many variables around costs. because there's nothing changing in that time frame that would cause those costs, those predictions to change. Whereas if you are getting a fast feedback loop, those costs would change. So you could probably articulate those better, and it might be interesting to, for example, list what are the few things that either need to happen for this to be true, like the kind of critical things, like this is the time frame, but it takes like 2 or 3 key assumptions for this time frame to work. One, when we do hit market, like it's not a dud, and not a dud means X. Two, there's 3 risk areas in implementation. Like a lot of this implementation just takes a lot of time, right? It's FDA, and you have to do all that stuff, or it's hardware, and you have to do all this stuff. So some of it is just doing the work, but there's like 3 things that have to go right that are risky, and we're going to call that out. So in software, just everything's a risk. So you could list it, but everyone would list the same very long list of things, right? But there, it might be useful to say some of this is very well known, so I'm going to show you. These parts are the risk points, and again, being really honest about what's the risk points. That's awesome. The investor's not looking for zero risk. They're looking for what is the risk, and can I stomach that risk? And I feel like this team understands their business and their risk so that they'll go attack that risk. Like if you can't articulate the risk, then I don't have confidence that you will address it, such as pulling that stuff earlier in the timeline so you can react sooner, or investing in something or other to de-risk it, whatever it is that you would do about it. But if you can articulate, it's like, okay, this person has thought through, they understand what's risky, so they can take actions accordingly. That feels like the right way to address the risk. I feel better, right? So calling out risk could help. Yeah.
Going back to the talk on justifying, why this team and not another team.
Mhm.
A lot of us in here are students, meaning we have limited industry experience.
Right.
So then, how would someone like us, who we're both undergraduates right now, how do you think we should go about justifying our team?
What's the product?
advice for that? It's a software product for surgeons.
So yeah, why should you do that?
Why?
Yeah, why should you do it?
Well, we're partnering with some of the top surgeons.
But why should you do it? Why shouldn't we have a surgeon go do that? What about let's go to Surgeon Monthly or whatever the periodical is, and take the guy on the cover of one of those, or the woman on the that's profiled in the last one. Why shouldn't she go out to the surgeons and ask them the same questions? Because she can get in there and talk their language. Why should it be you?
Well, the software product that we have involves both the surgeons and the patients, and we bring a unique patient perspective.
Why is your perspective on patients unique? I'm a patient as well. In fact, you're probably not a typical surgeon. Or do you have a story where you've had a lot of surgery? Personally?
Personally, I have.
You have?
Yeah.
That is a good story. No, that's good. But see, that's a good thing to have. Now, that's not unique in the whole world,
No, sure.
right? But that can work. Sometimes that's the most compelling personal stories, right? I went through this, and then I was like, other people shouldn't have to. That kind of personal connection to the problem, even though, like, yeah, a million other people went through that in the last 2 years. I know, but I did too. And so I have a perspective, and I have a passion for it that other people don't. They just go back to their lives and complain about surgery. But I had a passion about this particular thing, and so I'm doing it. That's a very common and very persuasive personal story. I mean, think about any self-help thing. It's always like they went through some kind of crap, just like a million other people went through the same kind of crap. But for whatever reason, they have a passion about it. They have a way of talking about it. They have a way an expository technique around it, and some kind of thing to say about it on the other side of that. And is it unique? Who cares? It's them. It's fine. It doesn't have to be unique. It just has to be something that it matters to you. And so there could be other things like, because you have no experience, you're not tainted by all the crap that happens there. You can take a fresh perspective because you're not embroiled in all that. When you write a page of prose, and there's like stuff that doesn't make sense and weird language, and you can't see it because you just wrote it. You have to have someone else edit it because they can see those things. And if roles were reversed, you would have seen the same things. It's just that you're so close to it, you can't see it. And that's what experts are like in their fields. So the good thing about experts is they know stuff, and that's good. So you want to have experts too. But the problem with experts is it's very hard for experts to have insights because they just wrote it and they're living it. It's very hard for them to pop out and understand another perspective. One of the things that you have when you don't have that experience, and you have youth, and you have fresh mind, open mind, technical mind, new tech and new technologies that are here now that you are accustomed to, that people who are in the industry for 10 years and busy with scalpels aren't even using. They don't even know it's there. Like, these are all advantages. These are all things that you have right now that you can bring to bear on a problem, exactly because you don't have that industry experience. So maybe if no one has any industry experience, that's probably bad, because then maybe you just don't know anything, and that's not good, right? But if there's a mixture, that's very powerful. And some of the best stories are around, like, so and so was a surgeon and knows everything about that crap, and then there was the and that's the gray hair person, and then there's the fresh new person that knows everything about tech and all this newfangled everything, and like Periscope can show the video while it's happening and so you could get a consult while you're doing it, like, and then VR could overlay the information so that it's all hands free. Like, that transforms surgery. Period. You don't need to be a surgeon to know that. So is a surgeon ever going to even know that that's happening and be messing with all this and be natively feel comfortable with all this stuff in order to get there? That would be rare. So, it's easy to just say, well, I don't have any experience, so I have nothing to bring. Not true. Fresh eyes is very valuable as long as there's some meat behind that, right? Having some experience with something, and it's like, God. And I thought there has to be a better way. Like, how many companies end up, this having, and there has to be a better way. That's fine. There you go, right? So yeah, I mean, sure. There's probably you could assemble some resumes that would be the perfect team. Okay, so it doesn't have to be exactly that, but you still want to say these things, and you have things.
In your experience as both an entrepreneur and as an investor, and this is assuming that there's no possibility of a warm intro, what are some best practices for writing a cold email to fundraise?
Yeah, boy, cold. Yeah, that's a good question. So how do you cold call investors? There's no doubt that the warm intro is the way, right? So knowing that, one idea is, can you cold call enough to then get some warm intros? Because there can be people that like, hey, this isn't right for me. The next question is, who would this be right for? Can you send me there, right? So even the rejection of a cold, I mean, if they actually respond, could actually be, could you lead to something that's at least lukewarm, right? So I would always be looking for that angle, right? So what I would say is, think about it, investors. The good ones are being inundated with this kind of email all day long. So obviously you want to know, how do I stand out in this pitch? That means, how can I say in like literally 2 sentences something that's going to pique their interest? So what is special and interesting about the company? Like, if you could only pick one thing that's most, maybe surprising is a good word. Interesting, that's kind of a boring word. Most surprising, that would pique someone's interest to go, okay, kind of want to hear about that. Another common technique is send the deck. And a lot of times you're worried, oh, they're going to do it. But have a deck that has enough information in it, and you just send it. So you're just like, I've already attached a deck. If you're interested, we'll take your time. I think a lot of people will click that deck. The worst is like, I have a company, do you want to hear about it? And it's like, there's no information. Why would I be interested in it? Right? Like, that's the worst. So the best could be the opposite, information rich. Here's something really interesting. I've attached a deck, and maybe you say something like a 5-slide deck. Like, this is super brief. I'm just gonna like hit super high points. If you like this, we can go through a bigger thing. And just something that takes little time and is interesting. Almost no email is interesting, so just being interesting will already be unique. Right? I'm trying to think what else is the things that where I actually open it. A common piece of advice there is to show that you're not spamming. This is not just a spam, that you actually know something about them. So for example, hey, I noticed you're an investor in X and Y. Because of those investments, we're similar to X because this and Y because that. And so I'm wondering if you'd be interested in us. So that shows you know who they are, you know what their expertise / interest is in. There's a connection. There is a connection between you and them, you and their interests. And therefore, what you're about to say is maybe actually relevant to them, as opposed to, I have a pitch, right? So a generic way to say that is personalize it, but that's a specific example of what personalization could mean. I guess one other thing about personalization or being interesting would be another pattern now is, because it's so cheap to start a business, a tech business, not the kind you're talking about, but a software online business, is so cheap. It's actually free, really, in terms of hard costs, because all the cloud providers now have startup programs where your first year, your first $5,000 is free, whatever, right? Like, it's pretty much free to have cloud services when you're starting out. A lot of people work for nothing just to be part of a company, etc. It's more people are actually online, have reasonable connections around the world, right? It's just more accessible in many ways. And so I don't need to say at all that that's a level playing field. It's not, but it is more accessible now than it was five years ago, or certainly 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. So therefore, there's many more startups. Also, it's cool now to have startups. So that's another thing. So now, it's many more startups in absolute number. That doesn't mean more of them succeed. But if the attrition rate is 90% fail, still in absolute number, those 10% that succeed, or that hit on something for whatever reason, there's just more of them. But there aren't more investors. The number of institutional investments over the last 5 years is completely flat at about 1,000 per quarter. It's got this, but like from one end to the other, it's 1,000. So you have more absolute number of startups that are pretty good, just because the dice are being rolled more often, and the same amount of money, or investments, I should say, because actually they're investing more money, but same number of investments. So that means the investors are in the driver's seat in a certain sense, in that they have the pick of a better supply. So that means they don't have to take some gamble on a startup with no customers, because they're seeing startups all the time that have customers, or more customers, or more growth, or more whatever the interesting KPIs are, right? It's usually something like that, right? Customers, MRRs, stuff like that. And so it makes it really hard, because if you don't have those things yet, you're competing against people, not necessarily that are better than you, or have better ideas, or whatever. It's just the dice roll so often. And you're competing with just the outliers, and that sucks. And so I say it all that, number one, because that is a useful perspective when you're going into pitch, that's the notion, and so that's what you're sort of up against, and it's hard. But also, going back to the original question of how do I be interesting, or how do I do a cold call? So given that's true, and what is the thing that does poke out from even those? So like maybe it's MRR. Maybe if your MRR is low, that's not the thing to use. We're already at 1,000 in MRR. They've seen companies that got to 50,000 MRR already before they raise money. So therefore, that's not the KPI to show out there. It's something else that's interesting, right? So in other words, it might color what KPI, what thing is in fact interesting, given what they're able to see now. So the things I just said are not as true with angels, and certainly not as true with unsophisticated angels, because they don't have good deal flow. They're not institutional. They're just seeing a lot of stuff, and it's so they're it's a little more muddy, and it's maybe a little easier in some sense, because you're not competing with all those, because all those are going to the good angels or the institutional seeds or something. But it's still going to be roughly true that there's more startups happening that people are seeing. That's tough. I mean, there's no so here's how you do it, right? Like, there's no silver bullet answers to how do I make a company successful? How do I get customers? Like, none of these have simple answers, right? Is that right? Because otherwise, there would just a formula, so it's not going to be that. But hopefully, that helps color what interesting means that you could maybe do. Yeah.
I had a question regarding, I guess, it's a later stage investment. But I was thinking of corporate venture capital. I feel like that's somewhere between a customer and an investor.
It's not a customer.
Okay. Because I felt like the product that you have would, in the end, go towards whatever they're doing. Like, they would be a customer. They would be using that product.
Sometimes. So the thing about corporate venture is they can do whatever they want. So normal venture funds are under certain rules, financial rules, and therefore they're structured in certain ways, and sort of all these things kind of come next, or sort of come with the institutional venture capital. But something like an individual angel or a family office, which is just an individual investor that's benching money for sort of a rich family sort of situation. They like Wild Basin here in town, for example. They can do whatever they want because they're under no rules. And venture funding is like that, or corporate venture is like that. Now, surely they're going to have some kind of charter with the company to what their rules are. So they have some rules, but it's not like SEC rules. It's It's not financial goals. So they can do anything. So you have people like Google Ventures, where it's absolutely not true that Google Ventures is interested in only stuff that Google might use, or Google would use as a product, or that Google might eventually buy. That is definitely not their charter. That's not their stated charter. That's not what they invest in clearly, and so like that's definitely not how Google Ventures works. Then you have other ones like GM or kind of Intel. Is more like this is like product development for us. We're funding companies because this way we can get true innovation because we'll get entrepreneurs, and if it works really well, we'll probably buy it. But that person will still make a lot of money, so they'll be rewarded for all this, and so on. So that is more like what you're talking about. And there's things that are in the middle. Qualcomm's kind of in the middle when it comes to that. Intuit is kind of in the middle when it comes to that. And I don't know a whole lot about things like Microsoft. There's many of them I don't know that much about, so I just don't know. But the point is, there's a gamut of that. And so it's very individualistic of like why did this company set up their venture arm, and what is the charter of that arm? Hopefully that's encoded in public, right? So you can just read it and decide like what this is. So if it is more generic like Google Ventures, then you just treat it like venture capital, like any other venture capital, which is what is the philosophy and investment thesis of this particular firm, and might I fit that investment thesis, and if so, I'm going to make a pitch that matches what this firm already wants, which is what you do with anybody else. If it is product, then it's still that, but now it's going to be even more specific. Why would Intel want this? But I bet you can interrogate them first. So what do you look for? What's your criteria? How are you measured in your success? That's always a great question to ask. Well, anybody really. But again, in a venture firm, it's always clear. It's to make money for the GPs, and that's it, or the LPs, and that's the goal. But for corporate, it could be lots of things. We have to create five new products a year, right? Or maybe it's a revenue goal, or maybe it's how many of those products. Like it's probably different goal for them personally than it is for traditional venture general partner. So, but they know what their goal is, and they're probably willing to tell you. So that would be a useful question, and then again, you could tune to whatever their goal is.
Okay, so what would a pitch for like an Intel or a GM look like in terms of like if say that you don't really have that information right off the bat that like this is exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for this many innovations a year or whatever.
Yeah.
What would a pitch to them look like to like kind of open the doors, start talking about things like that?
Well, again, you have to start with what is their goal. So, what if the goal for GM is branding? Like we want to do new cool things because we want to be the innovative, forward-looking company, and it's okay if that thing never makes it into a car. Some of the things that GM is doing in Capital Factory now is totally that. So that's not hypothetical. That's true. So, I mean, a pitch that's about bringing visibility to GM and a certain personality or aspect to the brand, that's going to be a wholly different pitch. And in fact, you would pitch a wholly different product than we need to make new things to stick in cars. And we think that the things in cars that are important are data, mobile, I don't know, whatever their little thesis is about what's important about cars now, right? And that'd be a totally different product they would then need to invent and pitch about that. Like, okay, now in a mobile app you can see all these things about what's going on in the car and trigger alerts when whatever, and I don't know, something else, right? Whereas a branding thing could be like a weird demo at an event, right? So it's hard to generically answer that because I think, again, just like building a product, it's sort of like saying, what product should I build? It's like, we gotta go out to the market, see like what's the problem, what is customers interested in, what are your insights? Like, there isn't an answer to that. It's like you gotta go find out that what are the goals here first, and then build that around that. Does GM care about the team or not? Don't know. Have to ask them, right? Like, so I think it's hard to generically answer the question, what would that look like, without knowing what are their goals and how are you helping them achieve their goals.
Okay.
But that's how I build it. I would find out first and then build the pitch around that.
Okay, thanks.
To kind of pivot a little bit into sort of your motivation and your goals, talk a little bit about what keeps you motivated through all of the startups that you've worked on, and maybe touch on, correct me if what
Yeah.
that transition looked like and
Yeah.
how did that work?
Well, those are all big topics, which I'm happy to get into. um, so first, what motivation is changed over my life so far, which maybe isn't surprising because unlike a politician, I don't have to have the same ideas for 30 years or else get lampooned because I'm a flip flopper. I can just simply evolve as a person, like hopefully people do. Um, so early on, it was definitely money motivated and ego motivated, and that worked out okay. Um, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's useful to try to dig into what is motivating, and because what's bad is when you're really motivated by X, but you build a company that requires Y, then you're not the right person, right? Because it's misaligned with what you really want. That's never going to be good. You're never going to be the best at that because that's not really what you want, and you'll burn out because it's again not what's energizing. So I think it's very hard, especially the younger you are, the harder it is to know how you work, and what motivates you really, and what you're really like. It's actually harder then you get older and finally figure it out when it's too late. That's the human condition. So oh well, but it's worth investigating early what that could be, and then aligning what you do, whether it's a startup or otherwise, and how the startup is or otherwise, with what that is, so that you can be, if not happy, then maybe fulfilled, right? And good at it because it's aligned with who you are. So early on, that's what I did, and I wasn't so thoughtful about it then, but anyway, it was true, right? And that worked out okay. But at Adobe Engine, current company, I actually felt the change where that wasn't true anymore. And so what had happened was, with the success of the previous companies, I didn't have to make any more money. So I do want to make more money, but that's not really the primary motivation. Um, and ego's definitely a part of it. But then again, like I have it. Like I got this blog that's very well read, and I get to speak anywhere, and I get to do stuff around Austin, and do stuff like this. Like I want to stoke that because ego is something that I want to stoke, but I got it already. Like I don't have to make a company to do that. So, so those ended up not being the things anymore that was important. And so so WP Engine was bootstrapped for the first 18 months because I figured I'm a bootstrapper. That's my life, right? Um, but then this turning point happened where it's like I realized I didn't want to do this for the fourth time, another bootstrap company, not because it was boring, because you have to have a beginner's mind. You have to always assume everything's new and figure it all out again, really. So not that, but rather the kind of constraints and goals are the same. Like you're always money constrained, and you're trying to be profitable and squeak by and see what you can do. As opposed to if you're not money constrained and the goals are lofty, and you're going to be building for right now we have 400 employees, which is a very different sort of a challenge for organization and hiring and growth and everything than it is when you're say 12. And so it would be a different journey. I wanted a different journey. Um, and so because I was different, I had certain success. I was also a father and wanted to spend more time at home. Didn't want to be 120% startup mode all the time. So there's all these reasons why for me it was a different motivation. And so what I realized then that was really exciting because I sat down. I really thought like why am I even doing this? This is very stressful. I don't need this. Why am I even doing it? And I realized it was amazing creating jobs for other people. It's like what it came down to is like people would say this is the best company I ever worked at, and that is incredible if you think about it. Like the really the valuable thing we all have is time. It's the one thing that you can't get back. We all have roughly the same amount of, maybe less sometimes, and no amount of money really is worth wasting your time. And to say the thing that I do at work, which is most of my waking hours, and away from other things that I prefer doing, whether that's hobbies or family or whatever it is that's outside of work, that this is the best thing I could be doing, and it's my best time, whether because I'm empowered or I'm growing or it's fun or I like my coworkers, whatever the reasons are, that you feel that way is incredible, and almost no one does feel that way about going to work. So to make jobs like that and opportunities for people to come in and grow and for their own careers and fulfillment and so on, and just have that was actually kind of amazing and maybe more important than all that other stuff. And so I realized that was actually really a driving thing for me. And it became part of our culture that we still have. It's on the wall when you walk in the door, these things. And so even today, that's a big driving force for me. today we really talk about the driving force, the kind of the reasons. So metrics are important in growth. It's all important because otherwise you're not building a big company, a valuable company, a sustainable company if it's not profitable, right? So these are all important and what you talk about every day. But like if you do all that, if you build a big company that no one wants to work at, then no offense to anybody in this room, and I know David's not here, but I don't know if you disagree with me, but you just built Dell. And like you don't, you might as well just go work at Dell then. Just go work there if you want to have that, right? And so we can do better than that. We should do better than that, right? And there's no reason not to. And there's big companies like Google, even Microsoft. Everyone likes to poo-poo on Microsoft, but it's still true, where it's not like that. It's better, and at super duper scale, right? So clearly this can be done at small and super duper scale, and we should as entrepreneurs make the world better. And it's not just products and making money, although that's true, but like something else that's important, like just making people's lives a little better because they like going to work and they're growing at work and so on, making more money. And so some of the most amazing story about a WP Engine isn't even about a product. It's stuff like we all the time there's people, especially at support, and often they come from places where like they don't get it, they get paid shit by the hour and no benefits, and sometimes they have structured so it's only 36 hours and then they need a second job. Like all this garbage that happens to people who don't have a lot of opportunities, and that's a shame. That's bad. So to say like that's never going to happen, you always get all the benefits. You're always going to get paid right, and all these benefits and food at the office, and all this shit that you can have, and the career opportunities to grow. We had 50 people out of 150 people last year at support get promoted either within support or to other organizations. They went to sales, they went to engineering, they went to finance even. So that people could come in who have no college education and don't have a lot of other options because of the normal resume and company process, and then to be able to, they have to earn it, right? But to be able to earn something else in their careers and so on, that's a phenomenal thing to do, and it's the kind of thing where you're proud of having 400 jobs because they're those kind. And they're creating those kind of opportunities, and that's just, to me, that is more making a dent in the universe, or making it's not about like how many people are looking at the app, like that's not necessarily making a dent, but we have people who, especially at a support, but others, where they said I never thought I could ever have a house. I just got a mortgage because I can now, and like it's phenomenal. Or last year we had someone who said, hey, this is a sales engineer, so someone who is engineering but helps with a complicated sale. And we said, hey, we're sending you to Web Summit in Dublin, and you're going to be one of 3 people representing us there. It's the first time we've gone to the conference, but like, you're going to kick ass there, and it's going to be great. And he starts crying. He's like, no one in my family has ever left the country or gone to college. I don't even know how to get a passport. I'm going to need help. And I can't believe that the company's entrusting me to do this. Like, it's just so incredible. So it's things like that. It's the little things. Not little, right? But I mean, it can sound little, especially when you come from a place of privilege, as really we all do, right? To see what it's like to help people who don't have that kind of privilege earn their way to it. He earned it, right? Because he's great. Right, but earn that, because most of the time, people who don't have as much privilege can't even earn it. And so to fix it, to help even in a little way, that's important. So that kind of thing really drives me now. And there's also things like, and we talk about this. It's even again on a wall. We all live in communities. Like for us, some of that's awesome. Some of that stuff like WordPress itself. It's an open source product. Because of WordPress, we can build our products and be successful. So isn't it incumbent upon ourselves to go contribute back to WordPress? Warren Buffett has this great phrase. He goes, the purpose of capitalism is to accumulate capital. So that's fine. You don't have to apologize for wanting to make a bunch of money. That's the game. But the good question is, so now what are you going to do? Now what? So, okay, you got it. Now what? Same thing with privilege. I know I keep bringing that up, but why not? So I have whatever the maximum amount of privilege you could have. So I live in a generic lottery. I'm a cisgendered white male living in Austin, Texas. Are you kidding me? Like, well, that's it. I win. Right? Okay, I'm Jewish, so it's a little bit worse. Somewhere else in the world, it's much worse, right? But in Austin, being Jewish, okay, so here's maximum, and here's me, like squeaking in right into maximum, right? Okay. So again, what do we do? Apologize? No. The question is, what are you going to do? That's all, right? It's not about apologizing. So communities is another thing you can is an answer to Warren Buffett's question or that question. What are you going to do about it? So okay, so like WP Engine, we do more than one event per month where we do things in Austin, helping kids learn how to build websites so they can be self-sufficient or just learn skills, etc. Or just things like hand drives or whatever. With WordPress, we have full-time engineers who just work on WordPress, the open source project, which means all their work goes to our competitors too. But that's okay because we inherit countless hours of whoever around the world in WordPress. That's what it means to be part of a community that is sharing, right? So there's all these different ways to look at what does the community mean or what does it mean to take that success and not apologize for it and drive to it. I mean, it's a business, for God's sakes. Like, we're brother capitalists. That's fine, but what are you going to do? So that's a powerful question that I never asked before. Never. Again, it was all ego and money, right? So there's no room in there for what do you do about it, right? So I'm not saying that's wonderful that I was like that, but that's what I was. So anyway, so those are the things driving now. So that actually can then get to your second part of your question, which is now I'm not the CEO. What's up with that? And that's a whole other thing, which again I'm happy to get to. But I'll do the super short version. Is the only reason for me to stay the CEO at WP Engine would be ego. That's what it really. And of course, it took me 4 months to get to that. Right, I'm boiling down all this shit, like the conclusion. But that is the conclusion. And when I realized over a long time that the way I would be happiest, have the most fun, and be most impactful to the business, and have the business itself have the most opportunity to be successful, would not be as the CEO. And when you realize, so I'd be the CEO for what? Because all those things are true, except I wouldn't even be happy doing it. So why am I doing it again? There's only really one reason. But of course, you get to well, you're always the founder. That never goes away. So what do you need the CEO for, really? Right? So I mean, that's not true of everyone. Again, it's very personal, obviously. But and then we had the perfect person to be the CEO, which was our COO, Heather Bruner. And anyone who's been in Austin for a while knows who Heather is, and would go like this and know why she is just an amazing, incredible person and executive and person to be our chief executive. And that's worked out really well. That happened 2.5 years ago, and it's just been wonderful. So I can give you, and it's actually a very useful sort of life. It's useful everywhere in life to have this framework of this kind of thing. So if you want to, I'm happy to give you actually all of that, how that all happened, because it is very applicable. And in fact, even today we talk about at WP Engine for how people think about what they want to do and why and so on. So I'm happy to go into that if you want to keep on that rabbit trail. But but it was basically that realization, and then it was a matter of being careful about not making people think I'm out the door, or that the board made us do this, or I don't know, other negative things, right? Because it wasn't. And so it was very important to articulate all this really well, so that everyone would realize this is all good, and Jason's not leaving, and whatever. Which of course, then the proof is in the pudding. But still, you didn't want to cause extra strife, right, or something. So then it was a careful how do we go about this? But even that took 2 weeks total. That wasn't a big deal. You just want to be careful, right? So if you want, we can go into that framework. But yeah.
How have your processes changed? In starting a company, now that you've kind of learned a lot of stuff, as first-time entrepreneurs, a lot of the stuff we hear it, we're like, it's going to be a lot of reading, and it's going to be a lot of conversations to even understand. So as you kind of accrued more experience in all these different business roles and all these different things, how has that changed for you?
So what processes are you talking about?
Just and maybe how you manage people, how you interact with the team, how you do your research, anything that you that's consistent when starting all new businesses, even if it's in different areas.
I think you could probably take a lot of process or management advice and find companies that are very successful taking that advice and have failed a lot taking that advice, and you take the negative of that advice and also find companies that are successful and failed. So I feel like management advice, process advice, there's probably very little of it that's universal. And so it's really more about what is going to match the culture and work style, and maybe the sort of requirements of the industry or market that you're in, what would match that well. So, there's companies like, was it Valve, where there's basically almost no management structure at all, and everything's just sort of these self-forming groups and whatever. It's also the gaming industry where creativity is paramount, and also just getting things out the door and shipped is very important. And so that's fine, but then you do something that takes a 4-year plan, and you can't do that. You can't execute a 4-year plan and it's like, oh, let's just do stuff. Like, that's not how you're going to execute that. That would be a very bad idea. So that just goes to show that, like, matching the needs of the business in terms of maybe timelines or who is in the business and what we're trying to do, what kind of people are we trying to recruit, and so what kinds of people would they be, and what process would work for that. So I think you have to take the stuff that works, and if you don't know any of those things, then what I would say is it is actually a valid thing to take whatever advice you like. And that sounds funny, like, but I don't know, like, it's not. I'm just guessing, and it's like, well, if you're just inventing new process, then maybe that's not on the basis of anything. But as soon as someone's articulated it well, that means someone's thought it through a lot, maybe tried it. That's a good start. And since you don't know which ones will be right, if you take things that resonate with you, that implies you'll probably implement it better. So if you're a more haphazard whatever, and you implement a process that works with haphazardness, you're more likely to be successful implementing it because it matches you. So you'll naturally feel better with it. Whereas if you take the view, as some people do, that say like, well, I'm haphazard, therefore I need a super rigid process to keep me in check. But really what will happen is you don't fit that, and so you won't operate very efficiently or happily in that. So you won't do a very good job at it. Even if it's a good idea, you won't do a good job at it because it doesn't match you, see? So that's why taking the, like, well, I read this and I'm just like, yes, that, gosh, is actually a pretty good sign. Now, how does it evolve? I mean, it's just too complicated a question because every department, every type of thing, HR, technical, hardware, people, everything changes as you go through these different stages. And it's even different, when you start with just 3 people and no management, and then you have your first manager around maybe 12 people, and then around something like 50 to 80, you have several levels of management, and HR stuff is starting to happen, so you kind of have to have something there, and finance becomes a thing, and stuff starts, and you kind of need at least usually in like 1 or 2 departments some real executive leadership that has been there, done that, and can help start stretching that particular department to evolve in the way that needs to be. And then at hundreds, we have offices around the world. You can't know everyone's name, so it's even more fragmented and difficult to do things like culture and communication and so on. And also, another thing that happens with scale, and this is true generically, it's not a process, but it's an effect that's true generically, is scale makes rare things become common. Like whatever happens sometimes, well, if it's times enough, then it's happening, right? So on the tech side, you see it this way. So a lot of people think server management must be easy for us because we have scripts, and so the scripts can run on 30 servers, or they can run on 5,000 servers, which is how many we have. And because it's a script, it just runs. It's computers. That's what it does. Of course, that's not true. And the way to see that is like this laptop here will crash sometimes, and you can't predict when or why. You can't really prevent it. It just is going to happen. So let's suppose it crashes that unpredictably once every 4 years. I mean, that's pretty rare. So yeah, sure, somewhere in that time frame, it's going to just wig out. So we have 5,000 servers. 4 years is 1,200 days. So that means every day, like 5 servers are just going to crash for no reason. Unpredictable, unpreventable. Oh crap, that actually does not sound easy to deal with. And then anything just slightly less rare, that's dozens of times a day. So you can see even in stuff like computers, it's not true that it's just easy because you'll just run a script somewhere. Like, no, it's actually hard. Of course, people are even harder. So obviously there's organizational process, communication, all that kind of stuff that you read about, or if you're an MBA, then you see all that, right? There's also the human side, which I think maybe isn't talked about enough, especially in school, which is, well, you think about it, at W Engine right now, there's always someone being born, there's always someone dying, there's always someone getting married, there's always someone going through a divorce, there's always someone moving somewhere, or just kind of anything in the human condition is going to happen like a lot. And that is hard. It's like it's news and stuff. Here's another weird one. 1 in 50 people will die by suicide. Did you know that? It's pretty high, right? Not every year, but like of deaths, 1 in 50 is suicide. So like one of the things UT has to deal with is people kill themselves all the time. And if you heard about every student that did that, that would be really rough, actually. And so, people jump off of things like these parking garages constantly. In fact, I used to live in Prather when I was here in the 90s, and there was actually like 4 of them in 1 year off the one parking garage that was right across from where Prather is. Um, and so, like, that's just happening all the time. Now, you kind of don't want to know that. Like, on the one hand, you kind of do because you care, but it's too overwhelming to know what 50,000 students are doing. Like, all horrible things are happening each day. That's the answer. And so, like, that's too much. You can't handle that. And so, as the company grows to a lesser, it's 50,000, we're 400. It's obviously a smaller number, but like stuff's happening. And so that's hard. And then furthermore, you can't talk about the worst things. So and so suddenly isn't at the company anymore. What happened? Can't say. Why not? Because you have to think about the victims. Right? The worst thing you can do is make the victims go through more crap by having it become public. So you absolutely can't say anything because you're thinking about them. So what does that look like to everyone else? They're gone. The company's they're gone. And the company won't say why. The hell? It's awful. What about our culture of transparency, which we have? Well, yes, except for things that are not our secrets to share. Things that would hurt someone to share. That's where transparency has this fault, right? And then, of course, they always have some story about how they were treated unfairly. So whoever knows them outside the company, they hear the story of like, yeah, what the hell? Like, yeah, it was a little something, but like they totally overreacted. Fuck them. Like, okay, well, that's the narrative, and we can't say anything about it. That is hard. So that's just to say, scale brings stuff, and there's all the sort of professional stuff. There's all this other stuff too. It's hard, and we're small enough that like it's hard to hide that stuff. UT can happen, and like you just don't know because it's just too big. So I guess that's something. But like you kind of know where still you're gonna know. So it's hard. So I don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at, but it's true. And so it just goes to show when you say like everything changes with scale. Like it really that goes deep. That statement. And it's not even just about like so. Here's how we're going to organize projects now, which is true, but it's just bigger than that. And it's part of why it's just so difficult. And why it just chews people up, and a lot of people can't last that long. And it's okay. It's okay to go like I did this for 3 years. I can't do it anymore. Love you guys, but I gotta stop. This is crazy. It happens all the time, and it's totally logical. It's hard.
Just on Crunchbase, looking at the very ground, you
Yeah.
had so a little over 3 years between your Series A and your much larger Series C. I'm just curious how, I mean, obviously everyone here would love to be looking at Series A, and thinking about Series C, but how does the pitch change and between as you ask for more and more money, or there's an established company, you got a reputation? Is it the same pitch? Is it you looking for different numbers?
Yeah, definitely different pitches. Different pitches for different stages. So early on, it's all risk and no information. So there has to be some kind of narrative that gets someone excited anyway about the opportunity, about the team, about what you know, and right, because it's all risk. And then is this team slash system, can they tackle all of these unknowns? That's the question. Um, Fast forwarding to like all the way to the other end of the spectrum, like our last round, for example, which was 18 million. Excuse me, again, these allergies are killing me. Sorry. It's all about predictability. There shouldn't be risk like that. There are risks. There's always risks, but the risks are things like the market shifts. The rise of mobile means that websites aren't created as much. That's not a risk we hear about when you're little. Like, what are you talking about? Like, first of all, it'll take a decade. Second of all, like, right? But as you're getting bigger, the question is, how will you go from, say, 60 million to 200 million in revenue? Well, that's going to take 5 years, and the market has to do this and not shift this way or that way. Here are these big trends, and so the question becomes, how can the business predictably improve gross margin while hitting a growth rate of this? And then you do have longer view plans, and you do have to justify why you can predict out that far. Now, of course, the farther out you go, the less you know, always, right? But you've got to be closer to that and hit that. As of this quarter, well, we just finished the half. We are within 1% of our plan from the beginning of the year. That's predictability. As you get big, predictability becomes very valuable. Of course, Wall Street loves predictability, right? But even never mind Wall Street, why is that interesting anyways? Because when you have a big machine with all these gears turning, like you have to be able to predict something in the future so you can plan now for that. So one very simplistic example is hiring. So in support, so about half the company is in customer service, so account management, migration services, tech support, like stuff that has to do with customer service. About 180 to 200 people are in there. So that more or less grows with our revenue. Like we try to be more efficient, of course, but it more or less grows our revenue. So that means if, let's say we grow 25% quarter over quarter, so we'll need to grow that organization 25%. So that means we're going to have to hire 50 people. Oh, that's actually a lot. And then you say, like, well, what does it take to hire 50 people? Well, how many candidates do you need? Many times that, and so on and so forth. So you have to have, like, hiring things and recruiters in different places around the world, actually, and then get them in. And then you realize you can't really hire 50 people that all have the right skills. You're going to have to hire people who have the aptitude to learn the skills and the right culture fit that you can't teach, like empathy and sharing and learning, and then train them, which means you have to have a training program. So we have a dozen people at the company just in our training program internally so that we can hire people and train them to do support. You have to know all that before you need to hire that person. All that has to be built ahead of time, right? And if we're growing to, so this process of like sourcing, interviewing, hiring, going through the training program, that's going to take at least a quarter, maybe more. So that means you have to be doing that a quarter ahead of when you need them. So you have to be able to predict the next quarter really well because you have to, hire now for say 2 quarters from now. And if you hire too much, it costs a lot. If you hire too little, it costs the customer because in bad experience, right? And the people left behind who's trying to keep up with too much work. So that's just that's a simple version of what's important about predictability. Of course, you could tell similar stories about kind of every process in the company. So predictability becomes very important. And so you're talking about why is this predictable? What are the bigger risks? And also, growth becomes harder as a percentage anyway as you get bigger. Like, how do we double from here? Early on, we would double in 4 months. Now it's hard to double in a year or more. So how do you continue to get bigger changes? So in later rounds, the question is, now how are you going to grow? And how are you going to control these other things that should be predictable? How do you make them predictable? And then how are you going to find new ways to grow? And it can't be more AdWords. That is a great idea in the seed round. It's a terrific one. More of what we just figured out worked. But later on, more of what we figured out worked is not true. We buy all the AdWords. Right? Everything that's in the inventory we could buy, we do. Because you can only be there once. So if you're not hitting your daily whatever, there is no more AdWord to buy. You try to optimize it, but like that's it. That's not where you're going to get the next round of growth, right? So you start maxing out these channels and things, and so you need to find new ways to grow. So later on, it's what are the new ways to grow? What are the new products to bring to bear? What are the big sort of strategic or sea change things happening in the market in longer time frames that you're going to have to attack and deal with? So it's a totally different pitch, and none of that shit matters when it's low. So the pitch changes quite a lot. The investors also want different things, and so therefore, obviously, again, you're always pitching to a specific audience, right? So obviously, if the audience changes, your pitch is going to change accordingly. So, for example, a later stage investor is putting in a ton of money and is happy with a 3x return. An early stage investor is putting in less money and needs a 10x return, or else not, because the earlier stage is less likely to succeed. Of course, the winners have to cover the losers. So since early stage is more failures as a percentage, they need more X value on the successor. So they need to see it get a lot bigger, 100X what it is now, right? But a C stage investor does not ask how do you get 100 times bigger, and they don't need you to be 100 times bigger. 3X in 3 years would be great. So that also changes the pitch. Again, you want them to feel like there's a high likelihood that you will be 3X in 3 years, not a chance in hell that you might be 10X in 5 years, which is the early fun, right? They'd rather be more predictably successful, right? And the success is not these nutty numbers anymore. They may, depending on how late it is, like in a D round especially, they'd be more interested in like, what is the exit? Early on, you get those questions a little bit, but really, to me, when a seed stage investor's asking what's the exit, what they want to hear is, I don't care because we're building $1 billion company. That's the answer. That's really the only answer that there is when it's early. But when you're, when you're sizable, that's not true anymore because options are limited. Like even at our size, options are limited. Who could buy us? A small number of companies because we'd be very expensive. Um, and going public is hard and unlikely, even if you're doing well. PE is possible, but it's a whole different kind of strategy. And you can go on your own for a while, but sometime the investors want their money back. So at scale, or even mid-scale, the question of how do you get out of this, or how really the better question is how do you make this stock liquid, becomes a very real question that has to be answered. And whereas early on, that's not true at all. To me, it's I wouldn't quite say it's a trap, but almost a trap of saying like, what's your exit strategy? Oh yeah, shoot, if someone gave me $1 million, I'm out of here. Like, wrong. That's a trap, right? But late stage is not a trap. It's because the options are not clear necessarily, and you want to know what those are, and that you're driving to not hit one to the exclusion of all others, unless you are on a path to IPO, and that's the plan, and the board knows that. In which case, that's fine. But rather to keep your options open, but know what they are, so that you're building the other stuff inside the company that facilitates those options, which I could talk about if anyone's interested in that as well.
Does anyone have any other questions?
So
Let's get this last one.
you mentioned the exits. So what was your experience like selling your previous startups as opposed to sticking with this one? Like at what point does it become clear where you sort of go the exit strategy route as opposed to sort of sticking longer, going for a bigger route?
Well, remember, I bootstrapped those other companies, so that's very different. And you're not beholden to anybody else. And you don't have to build a big company if you don't want to. Once you take investment, that's not true. You're building a big company. If you don't, it's not a success. Now, I mean financially. Obviously, as I was just saying, there's lots of other definitions of success, right? So let's put that in perspective. But financially, it's not a success unless it gets big. Once you raise even a little money. That's just the math of investment, right? So I think in a venture business, the exit is dollars and cents. It's really about the board and usually the investors on the board asking themselves, is my investment better served by sticking with it to get a bigger exit later, or getting out now at whatever is kind of roughly available? And it is the job of the board to ask that kind of question. That's their duty is to figure out what to do with the equity and investment of the business. So that's fine. It's a good debate to have. So that is very dollars and cents. Like, well, we think the risks are here and there, and it's going to be difficult for the company to grow from this point forward. And so we don't want to wait for like kind of mediocre growth from here out, and then we get a worse exit. We might as well just take it now, and when things are looking good, there's that argument for selling now, or we've lost confidence that the business can really do well, and so selling now is better than waiting for that eventuality and then getting less, or vice versa. Famously that the Facebook getting the offer was $1 billion or $3 billion from wherever, Google or whoever it was, to buy them, and the board was called to order, and Zuckerberg goes, "Well, obviously we're not taking the deal, but I want to talk about something else." They're like, wait, wait, $1 billion is a lot of money. Maybe we should talk about it. But of course they didn't, right? But again, $1 billion is a lot of money. You got to talk about it, don't you? But he had that much conviction. When you have that much conviction and the board agrees, like, there you go, right? But if you have less conviction and it's a good offer, then that could be logical. So it's very dollars and cents when it's venture funded. When you're bootstrapping, it's up to you. That's for the benefit and the drawback in a way. It's your company, and your co-founders and so on, and hopefully you feel like your employees are part of it to some extent anyway. And so it becomes a very personal decision. And everyone says, it's not personal, it's business. Bullshit. Like, business is personal most of the time. And it definitely is in startups and bootstrap startups. It's totally personal, right? So, are you happy running this business? So often people build a business that they're then unhappy at. Like, if you talk to any bootstrapper that's been running their business for 7 years, and you get them to talk honestly because they are, or maybe you get some drinks in them or something, most of them are not happy. There's a scary little statement. Most of them are not happy. It's hard. The burnout is real. They don't structure their own position in a way that they're happy about. The same drive that made them want to break out and do something new, maybe that drive is still there, and You're not breaking out and do something new when you have a whole business to feed, right? So there's that. There's all kinds of reasons. Of course, selling the business doesn't fix it. Another interesting study showed that they interviewed like 37, it's not a big N, but 37 entrepreneurs who sold their businesses. And it was like postpartum depression. They were all depressed and like directionless. They don't know what to do anymore. Because their identity is the business. They don't even know who they are. Like they would say things like, I don't even know what my hobbies are. Okay, so now I can do whatever I want, and I just realized that's what I was doing. Now what? So selling doesn't necessarily help. Sometimes they do it, they assuage that by just getting into another startup in which they become unhappy again. Again, human condition perhaps, right? Better thing is to figure out what makes you happy and try to realize that entrepreneurship is an opportunity to build the life that you do want. That maybe is part of the promise, or it should be anyway. If you're gonna hate your job, you might as well like not stress out as much and have more free time, right? And work somewhere, right? So hopefully it helps. Maybe not every day or at first, right? Because you got to get going. But like maybe eventually the goal should be that you are in a place that you actually like going to work at and that you enjoy. Hopefully, and so I'd say it usually, for whatever reason, that's not the case. And so selling a business often comes down to that. Like I'm just done, or it's just too hard. And in tech, things do change, and it's kind of hard to continue innovating like that anyway. Maybe it has run its course, and that's that. So for me, at Smart Bear, just to, my story is IT Watchdogs was a different, the company before that we also sold. I had a co-founder, and he really got to that point, and that's really why we sold that company. Not against my will, but just like that was the motive force. Of like, let's go sell the company because I'm just done. There's more story behind that, but that was the thing. At Smart Bear, it kind of came in a weird roundabout, surprise way, because I wasn't trying to sell the company. It was 7 years in. I was not trying to sell it. It was doing well. And I got essentially a cold call from venture capital, which any company of a certain size gets cold calls constantly from venture capital. Hey, what's going on? Some of it is industry research to help their other companies. Some of it they're generally interested in, maybe they can invest. Venture capital loves certain kinds. Growth loves like a bootstrap company who've gotten to like 5 million. That's usually the limit where the smaller growth VCs are really interested. Because like, wow, you've built a real business, and now if we pour in money, maybe you can get to 30, 50, and you've de-risked a whole lot of stuff. And we realize we'll have to pay up for that, because you've built all this, but like very low risk for them. It's a good one, so you get a lot of calls. So anyway, that call eventually led to they made an offer, even before all the due diligence. It wasn't a formal offer. But like, what if it was this? Would you be interested? Because if so, we'll give you an LOI and actually do the due diligence and go see. And I remember coming home, I told my wife, hey, I was just talking to this guy over enchiladas at Trudy's, and he's like, we'll buy Smart Bear. And I'm like, I don't know what to do because it's actually a pretty good offer. It's not super high. It's definitely fair. Like, and I had this for 7 years. Geez, I mean, I guess 6. I left after 7. So I had this a while, and like, that sounds pretty good. I made sure all my employees had lots of equity at Smart Bear, so like everyone's going to make out really well, and I don't know what to do. And she says, well, you have to sell. Like, what? Well, I mean, sure, but why have to? Like, what? Why is that? And she says, well, don't you realize how unhappy you are? Nope. No, I didn't. But of course, it was true. I wasn't sleeping. I did whatever, right? And I was irritable and all this stuff because it was stressful. And I don't know, whatever reason, who cares? And so it was a great thing to get out of that. But I made that. Did I build that? I mean, I built that scenario. I didn't have to build that scenario that way. Although maybe I did have to, or maybe it was inevitable, but I could have found another way. Or knowing that, should we have gone out and on the road to sell it? Maybe gotten more money. Could we have gotten a different person to run it so that they could remain independent, which some of the employees wanted? Maybe. There's all, I don't know. There's all kinds of, you can't really try to guess at the counterfactual, right? And it's not terribly useful to second guess all that, right? Like life moves on, other than just what might I do differently next time, perhaps. So who knows? But the point is, like, I didn't think about it at all. It just happened to me, and that's crap. Because you certainly have the ability to think about it and try to decide, and whether that's better or not, well, it unfolds how it unfolds. But at least you tried. I didn't have the introspection to try. That was wrong. So I feel like that happens a lot, that exact thing. So, if and when we sold WP Engine, and it's not clear, we could IPO in some years, we could potentially have a sale, we could be independent for a long time, or whatever. So who knows? But it won't be that same way for a variety of reasons. One is because of raising money, that changes it. Another one because I didn't make that mistake this time. I figured out what that was, and to this day, I still do that. In fact, I'm still changing jobs. So like the first time I changed was to be the CTO, and Heather took over as the CEO, and I was running all of engineering and product. Then about 3 months ago, I don't have that either. I now have no direct reports, and it's lovely. I don't have deadlines. I don't have to worry about so and so said something about so and so. I don't have to get on the recruiters about how we haven't hired DevOps in 3 months and we're really behind. I don't have to do any of that. I mean, I'm interested and I want to help, but ultimately I leave the meeting and I don't have to do that. And that means I can spend my time really thinking about strategy for the company, the future of the company, what are other people in the industry doing, speaking outside of the company. That thing about the 5 W's and the why, I just got an article published in Fortune magazine about that. That's because I had the time to do it, and we have a great PR firm, and I had the time to go do that. Cool, that's fine. And what should the product strategy or the whole business strategy be, and what are our KPIs, and how can we analyze data better? Because that's another area of passion and expertise that I happen to have. So I can have a concentration in that. In other words, I can do things that energize me, and I'm good at it, and the company needs it. That's what you want to do, right? So it wasn't even a moment. It's a continuous thing, of course, and it should be for everybody at the company to ask where can they be very successful in those ways as best as possible, because ultimately that's going to be actually highest performance for the company and them being happy and fulfilled both. That's the truth. So that means I'm not itchy to sell the company or anything, even though we're 6 years in, just like SmartBear. But I'm not in that same place like SmartBear, and that's why, because we designed it that way this time. Not every month and every day, hell no, it's life, right? But more or less it is. So that's pretty good. So I think the question, how and why to sell, how is it different? A lot of it is how you design how the company works, the culture of what it means to have a job or a role at the company. And actually, me doing all that is is the best example for the company, because if I can do that, if I cannot be the CEO anymore, if I can change jobs, shoot, then anybody can. Certainly, there's no dogma around here about that. If I could do it, I mean, shoo-wee, right? Like, if I could give up being the big boss of everybody, wow, I guess you can really find your niche around here. Like, that's pretty cool. So anyway, actually, that's another thing, is how do you do that organizationally? How do you let people try things on and undo it is another interesting thing. But anyway, I know you're itchy for time and stuff. Yeah?
So how do you approach employees who want to start their own companies? Like, if you're building like you have an innovative startup, or it's not a startup by now, but
Depends what you think started.
or as you go through the process, usually like say with like really big companies like SpaceX or Tesla or
Those aren't startups?
no,
Wow.
when they first started off, they attracted a lot of talent, and those people in turn went out to start their own company.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that, like from your perspective? Do you embrace it, or do you kind of, I don't know, allow them to do that while they work for you? Or?
Right. Okay. So the question is, if you're a great, exciting, innovative company and you have people who are so good that they're very entrepreneurially, then they'll probably even start their own company someday. And how do you handle that flight of talent, and do you support it or not support it, and so on? So I would broaden that a little bit and just say starting your own business is not the only reason fantastic talent leaves. Maybe they got a great offer for doing just what they're doing, but for a lot more money, or for, I don't know, something that they care about. We had somebody leave the other day because they're going to Under Armour, and they love Under Armour, and they work out all the time, and like to work on the very products that they use is really exciting. It wasn't more money, it wasn't a promotion, it was just like, they like that. I was like, sure. So that's still talent flight, right? So talent in general. So I think you have to have the attitude that great talent can always, at any moment, just walk across the street, make between 10 and 50% more money, or let's just say compensation, whatever that means, all in. anytime they want. Why? Because there's great talent. Great talent's always valuable. There's always another company that just does pay more because of whatever. We once hired a DevOps away from one of the financial companies here in town. They have a lot of money, and he accepted, and he told them, and they said, if you will renege on that, which is a pretty big no-no after you accept, right? You're supposed to like do all this before you accept. They told him, if you renege on that, we will give you a $100,000 bonus immediately and raise your salary by also $100,000. So he told us that, and we're like, give him a big kiss and go there. It's fine. We'll rip this up, dude. Like, you gotta take it. Are you kidding me? Do that, even if just for a year. Just put that in your pocket, and then if you're still bored, come back. You know, like, of course, right? So it just goes to show it's always true. So if that's true, the talent can always leave. Oh, and the other reason is because you hired them and they had X experience and X whatever, and now they have more experience. They're better at whatever. So of course they can make more money, right? So hopefully you have raises as well to keep up that somewhat. But nevertheless, right? The resume's better now, of course. So so you have to assume it's always true of talent, period. So however you run your company has to be under the assumption that is exactly what's going to happen. So you can't get all upset about it because it's natural and it can be good actually for people to seek new things. By the way, we're always so helpful when people do that. We've had people come back. Just actually last week, someone came back to the company because they went somewhere else. It wasn't quite as good as what they thought it was, and they came back. Right, so that can happen too. But anyway, you don't do it because they'll come back. That's an extra icing if you've done it right. That's sort of an indication maybe you've done it right. They probably shouldn't come back, to be honest, because you want your life to move forward and have new experiences. Actually, probably be better. Anyway, so knowing that, you have to ask, okay, so how do I build a business or a culture and the processes and whatever inside the business where, even though they can always walk across the street and make more money, even though they could go make a company on their own because they're that good, they don't want to. That's the question. And some of that's money in the sense that like they should be paid fairly or whatever, right? Yes. But clearly that's not it because they can always make more money. So that can only be a piece of the pie. So then you get into like what motivates people at all, what makes people happy at all. And so there's a lot of theory about this, but I think probably comes down to a few things: autonomy, that you control something in a reasonable way; excellence, that you are able to do excellent work. You are given the time or space or tools or whatever, that you don't feel like I do this, but then it's just crap or it's shit or it never gets used or whatever it is that's not great work, because great talent wants to do great work and have the space to do that. So the control, the ability to do great work, learning and growing, whatever that means to them. That can mean many different things. Some people want to become a manager, and that's what that means. Some people say, I never want to manage people. That sounds horrible. I just want to be the best software engineer ever. So I still want more title, more responsibility, more money, more respect, more everything. I just don't want to manage people. So that has to be possible. So there's a lot of things that growth can mean. So be able to grow and feel like it matters, like whatever you're doing has meaning. If I don't do this, it actually matters to someone else. And again, not have to be super crazy, lofty thing, although maybe. But it can just be as simple as because our customers, for example, are marketers who are not technical, and so they're victims of tech. They don't know how to hire a consultant to make a WordPress site. That's like us trying to hire a pancreatic surgeon. What do you even ask? How do you vet that? You can't. So they're victims whether of consultants or tech. For us to eliminate that, because if you're not online, you're invisible. So for us to fix that for the world, since WordPress is 42.6% of the world's domains, like that's really important, and that's a terrific thing to do, and to make people's voices hearable and seeable, even if they get attacked by ISIS, which our customers sometimes do, or we host both the Democratic and Republican websites or different things, and they attack each other, just like they do with the phone banks. It's stupid, but their websites need to stay up where they're invisible. So this is important, just in terms of free speech, in terms of people's livelihoods and being able to operate. So it's important in some way. And even stuff like what we do for each other in terms of the jobs, like that's actually a good reason. There's an engineer just the other day that said when he sees what people in support can do, it motivates him to build the software because we're making this thing. I hesitate to say family. It's really a team because you don't pick who's in your family, but we pick who works with every family, right? So it's a team. We care about each other, but it's a team, right? And so that's just a long way of saying, like, these are the kinds of things. What's the purpose? What's my purpose? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I like the people I'm working with? There's an old adage that if you have 3 friends at a company, you're not going to leave. And yeah, it's very true. So, like, do I like who I'm working with? Do I think it matters? Do I have autonomy? Can I make excellent work? Yeah, you can make your own lists and things, like it's not exclusive, it's just these are among the things that are true, probably, more or less. And so I think you focus on those things and say, how do we make those things as true as we can, assuming they'll leave. And then they'll be bitter when they leave. It's probably for the best. And by the way, if they're not happy being at the company anyway, like, what, you want to make them stay? Yeah. You want to find someone who is super excited to be in that same seat. Right?
Yeah, well, Jason, thank you so much.
You bet.